Hello and welcome to the Sacred Truth channel. I'm Stelio Zandamela, and it's a pleasure to have you here. Before we begin, don't forget to follow the channel and activate the notification bell so we can learn together about the mysteries of the Bible, sacred stories, and the teachings of the Lord. Today we're going to talk about one of the most mysterious, debated, and frightening topics in the entire Bible, the mark of the beast and the number 666. Throughout the centuries, this number has stirred fear, curiosity, and countless interpretations. Many believe it is something physical. Others say it will be a form of technology, while some argue that it is purely symbolic. But the big question is, what does the mark of the beast really mean? To understand this, we need to go back to the book of Revelation, specifically chapter 13, where this prophecy is presented. The text says that all, small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, will receive a mark on their right hand or forehead, and that without this mark, no one will be able to buy or sell. This reveals something extremely important. We are facing a system that not only influences but controls fundamental aspects of human life, such as the economy and survival. However, limiting this prophecy only to economic control would oversimplify something much deeper. The Bible uses symbols, and every detail has a meaning. The forehead, for example, represents the mind, thoughts, and beliefs. The hand represents actions, behavior, and what we do. This means that the mark of the beast is not only related to something external, but also to something internal, a combination of what we believe and what we practice. The number 666 also carries a powerful symbolic meaning. In the Bible, the number 7 represents perfection, completeness, and what comes from God. The number 6, on the other hand, represents imperfection, something incomplete, something human. When this number is repeated 3 times, it expresses imperfection at its highest level. In other words, 666 represents the exaltation of humanity without God, the attempt of man to take the place of the Creator, to define right and wrong on his own. In this sense, the mark of the beast is not just a physical sign, but a symbol of loyalty. Accepting it means aligning with a system that opposes God, while rejecting it represents faithfulness, belief, and commitment to the truth. This makes the prophecy deeply personal because it is not only about a global event but about an individual decision. Revelation also shows that this system will not appear in an obvious or frightening way. On the contrary, it will be presented in a convincing, persuasive, and even attractive manner. There will be signs, influences, and arguments that will make people accept this system as something necessary, normal, and even beneficial. And this is exactly where the greatest danger lies, because the most effective deception is not what seems wrong, but what seems right. We live in an increasingly connected world, where digital systems control transactions, identities, and behaviors. Never before in history have we had such a high level of global interdependence. While the Bible does not directly mention technology, it describes a scenario where control over buying and selling is centralized, which leads us to reflect on the kind of world being built before our eyes. But the main point is not the system itself, but how people relate to it. The mark of the beast represents a moment when accepting this system will no longer be just a practical matter, but a spiritual decision. It will be a test of loyalty, where each person will have to choose between following the truth or giving in to pressure, and this pressure will not be small. Imagine a world where everyone around you accepts something as normal, where friends, family, and colleagues say it is necessary to live, work, and survive. Resisting in this context will not only be a rational decision, but an act of courage. It will mean going against the current, facing difficulties, and often paying a high price for remaining faithful. That is why Revelation speaks so much about perseverance. Faithfulness is not built at the moment of crisis, but in everyday life, in small decisions, in silent choices. Every time someone chooses the truth over convenience, they strengthen their ability to stand firm when it truly matters. Another important point is understanding that this battle begins in the mind. Before any external mark, there is an internal influence. Ideas, values, and beliefs are shaped over time. When a person drifts away from the truth, they become more vulnerable to deception. And when deception becomes normal, it stops being noticed. In this context, the number 666 represents a mindset, a way of living based solely on the human, without God, without spiritual reference. It is man trying to be the center of everything, creating his own systems, his own rules, and his own truth. And when this happens, the result is confusion, because without a solid foundation, everything becomes relative. Even so, Revelation makes it clear that there will be people who will not bow down, people who will remain firm, not by their own strength, but by faith. They will understand that true life does not depend on human systems, but on something greater, something eternal. And this understanding completely changes the way they face pressure. In the end, the mark of the beast is not just about a future event, but about a present spiritual reality. It is about a choice that begins now, in small decisions, in the way we think, in the way we live, and in what we believe. Because when the decisive moment comes, the choice will have already been made within each person. As we delve deeper into this topic, it is impossible to ignore an essential detail. The mark of the beast does not appear in isolation. It is part of a much larger system, a system that begins to form even before the final moment described in Revelation. This means we are not just talking about a future event, but about a process that develops over time, shaping mindsets, behaviors, and even values. The system described in the prophecy has a very clear characteristic. It seeks total influence, not just over governments or economies, but over the way people think, live, and make decisions. It is a type of control that goes beyond the visible, reaching the very core of human beings. And that is precisely why the mark is not associated only with the body, but also with the mind. We live in an age where influence is constant. At every moment we are exposed to ideas, opinions, trends, and patterns that try to define what is right, what is normal, and what should be accepted. Often these influences are so subtle that they go unnoticed, but over time they shape how we see the world. And when this happens, decisions are no longer fully conscious and begin to be guided by what has been internalized. It is in this context that the prophecy becomes even more relevant. The mark of the beast represents a point where this influence becomes total, leaving no room for neutrality. Every person will be led to take a position, whether consciously or unconsciously, and this position will be directly connected to what they believe and practice. What is both fascinating and concerning is that this system will not be imposed solely by force. It will be accepted. People will not only follow it, but defend what controls them. This happens because deception does not present itself as something negative, but as something necessary, logical, and even beneficial. Revelation warns us that there will be signs and manifestations capable of convincing even those who think they are steadfast. This shows us that the danger is not only in a lack of knowledge, but in a lack of discernment. Knowing something is not enough if a person cannot distinguish between what is true and what merely appears to be. And here lies one of the most delicate points of this prophecy: spiritual deception. Not everything that seems to come from God truly comes from Him. Not everything that moves us emotionally has a divine origin. In a scenario where the spiritual blends with deception, the ability to discern becomes essential. Imagine a world where the dominant system does not present itself as an enemy, but as a solution, where it offers security, stability, and order, where everything works better for those who accept it, while those who resist face hardships. In this scenario, the pressure will not be only external, but internal. Doubts will arise, questions will emerge, and the line between right and wrong may seem increasingly blurred. Social pressure will play a crucial role in this process. Humans by nature seek acceptance. They want to belong, to be part of a group. And when the majority chooses a path, it becomes extremely difficult to go in the opposite direction. Rejection, isolation, and difficulties can lead many to give in, not because they believe, but because they cannot endure the consequences of resistance. But this is exactly the point where true faith is revealed. Not as something superficial, but as a deep conviction, a certainty that does not depend on circumstances, on the approval of others, or on the conveniences offered by the system. It is a faith that endures even when everything around pushes in the opposite direction. Revelation shows that those who remain steadfast will not be perfect, but they will be conscious. They will understand that this choice goes beyond the present, that something greater is at stake, something eternal, and this awareness completely changes the way they face the situation. Another important aspect is realizing that the mark of the beast does not begin at the moment it is imposed. It begins much earlier in small concessions. Every time someone chooses the easier path instead of the right one, every time they trade truth for convenience, they take a step in the wrong direction. It may seem insignificant at the time, but over time, these choices create a pattern. And when the decisive moment comes, the person is already inclined to choose according to that pattern, not because they were forced, but because they have become accustomed to living that way. This shows that preparation for that moment happens daily, in simple decisions, in actions that no one sees. The number 666 then becomes even more significant. It does not only represent a future event, but a present reality. A mindset where humans place themselves at the center of everything, where God is set aside, where truth is relativized, and where everything is defined by interests, power, and control. This type of mindset can already be observed in today's world. A gradual distancing from spiritual values, an excessive emphasis on the material, a constant pursuit of control and dominance. All of this creates the perfect environment for the system, described in Revelation to be accepted without resistance. Yet even in this scenario, the message is not one of despair. It is a message of alertness, a call to awareness, an invitation to reflect on one's choices, on what one believes, and on the path one is following. Because in the end, the mark of the beast will not be just something that someone receives. It will be something that someone chooses, and this choice begins long before the final moment. We then arrive at the most decisive point of this entire prophecy, the moment of choice. Everything that has been built up until now, influences, thoughts, values, decisions, converges to a moment when neutrality will no longer be possible. There will be no middle ground, no room for indecision. Each person will have to take a clear stance. This moment will not be merely external, visible, or collective. It will be profoundly personal, because even though the system operates on a global scale, the decision happens within each individual. It is in the silence of conscience, away from the crowds, that the real choice will be made. And this is exactly why this decision will be so difficult for many. Not because they don't understand what is happening, but because the cost of standing firm may be high. Revelation makes it clear that those who refuse to accept the mark will face real limitations. They will not be able to fully participate in the economy. They will lack access to the conveniences of the system, and they may be seen as outsiders, radicals, or even a problem. Now imagine living in this scenario. Imagine seeing everyone around you follow a path while you must go in the opposite direction. Imagine feeling the pressure, the weight of consequences, the uncertainty of tomorrow. At that moment, faith ceases to be just a belief and becomes a practical decision, a choice that requires courage. But there is also the other side of this decision. Those who accept the mark will not do so merely out of necessity, but out of alignment. Because deep down, this choice reflects what has already been built within them. It reflects how they see the world, what they value, and whom they have chosen to follow. Revelation shows that this is not just a momentary choice, but a decision with eternal consequences. And this is where many avoid thinking, because speaking about spiritual consequences requires depth and responsibility. However, ignoring it does not change reality. The mark of the beast represents more than adaptation to a system. It represents a separation, a line that divides those who choose to follow the truth from those who decide to follow the easier path. And this separation will not be based on appearance, words, or declarations, but on real decisions. There is something extremely powerful in this message. God forces no one. The choice has always been and always will be human. Even in the face of the entire scenario described, each person will have the freedom to decide. And this freedom is at the same time both a privilege and a responsibility. Because choosing the easier path may seem advantageous in the moment, but what is immediate is not always eternal. And Revelation invites us to look beyond the present, beyond circumstances, beyond pressures. It calls us to see the spiritual reality behind what is happening. Many think they will be prepared when that moment comes. But the truth is, no one prepares in a single day. Preparation happens now in the choices that seem small, in decisions that seem insignificant. It is in daily life that the ability to stand firm when everything is at stake is built. The way someone deals with truth today determines how they will respond tomorrow. The way someone responds to pressure now reveals how they will face greater challenges in the future. Everything is connected. That is why the message of the mark of the beast is not only a warning about the end times, it is a call to the present, an invitation to reflect, an opportunity to evaluate one's path. Because in the end, the big question will not be what is the mark of the beast, but rather, which side will you be on when that moment comes? This is the question that remains. This is the decision no one can avoid. And this is the truth that few are willing to face. It is important to understand that the mark of the beast is not merely an isolated symbol, but a reflection of a global system that seeks to control not only people's external actions, but also their thoughts, choices, and most importantly, their souls. It represents the convergence of power, technology, politics, and economy in a single point of authority, where the individual is constantly pressured to yield, conform, and accept standards that go against divine principles. It is not just a number or a physical gesture, but a way of life, a mindset, and a loyalty that, once adopted, distances the human heart from God. The Bible warns us that the deception will be so subtle that many will believe they are doing good, when in reality they are being manipulated by spiritual and human forces carefully coordinated to lead humanity away from the truth. The danger is even greater. because the modern world offers countless distractions and promises of prosperity, security, and comfort, creating a sense of normalcy that hides the seriousness of what lies behind the mark. Every daily choice, every acceptance of values contrary to God's word, is an open door to this influence, making spiritual discernment even more urgent. It is an invitation to reflect on what we truly value, on our faithfulness to God, and on the vigilance we must maintain, because it is not only the body that is at stake, but the eternity of the soul. The mark of the beast, therefore, should be seen not only as a warning sign, but as a call to action, to unwavering faith and to the courage to remain steadfast in a world increasingly dominated by deception, seduction, and false promises. Understanding this sign requires study, prayer, and a constant seeking of the Holy Spirit, so that we can recognize the times and resist what is contrary to the truth of Christ. Ultimately, it is not just a warning about a distant future, but a present reality that demands deep reflection and conscious decision-making in every moment of life.